Now, here in Romans chapter 4, look at verse 14 again. If righteousness comes through keeping the law, well, then our faith is made void. Our faith is not necessary. And the promise, now watch what he says here, the promise is made of no effect. If God's promises are only for those who obey the law, then God's promises are worthless because no one keeps the law. If the only way you can get into heaven is by keeping God's law, you're doomed. If that's what's required, well, there's nothing we can do because no one keeps the law. And it doesn't matter how wonderful and glorious the promises of God are if they come only by keeping the law. Those promises are pointless if I've got to keep the law to get them. You know, if someone promised to give you $1 billion and you just got to do this one thing and you can have $1 billion. All right, what do I got to do? Tell me. You got to swim across the Atlantic Ocean. Well, you can offer me all the money in the world. It doesn't matter how much money you offer me. I can't swim across the Atlantic Ocean. I can't meet that requirement. Now, I did not Google it and check. I'm assuming no one has ever swam. So don't come after, well, actually, Pastor Dan. And this is how it is with the law. No one can keep the law, so if the promises come through the law by being obedient to the law, the promises are of no effect. They're pointless. They're worthless to me because I can't do that. Justification by the law is impossible. And again, you talk to people, you know people. You ask them, well, are you going to heaven? Yes. Why keep the law? I keep the 10 Commandments. Really? So you're telling me you can swim across the Atlantic Ocean? Look what it says in verse 15. The law brings about wrath. For where there is no law, there is no transgression. The law just brings the wrath of God upon us because we fail to keep the law. We all fall short. We all sin. The law just exposes our sin and shows us we're ungodly, that we're deserving of God's wrath. Over in Galatians chapter 3, verse 24, there it says that the law serves as our tutor. The law serves as our tutor to bring us to Christ. One of the purposes of the law is to show us how ungodly we are, how sinful we are, and the law brings us to Christ. The law shows us our need for Jesus Christ and his salvation, our need for justification by faith apart from the law. Right? So when someone says to you that they're going to heaven because they keep the law or they keep the 10 Commandments, they're really saying they don't know what the law says. They don't know the 10 Commandments. You can ask them, "Oh, can you name the 10 Commandments for me?" And you'll get a blank stare, right? And they might get one or two of them right, and then they're going to add in some rule that their mom had when they were a kid, like don't stand with the refrigerator door open, right? But that's not one of the 10 Commandments. It's one of your mom's commandments. Because if they really knew what the law said, they would recognize their own guilt. Right? Remember in chapter 3, the law stops every mouth. The law silences everyone because it just shows us our guilt and brings the knowledge of our sin to us. And it brings us to the place where we realize, well, I can't be justified by keeping the law, obviously. I need another way to be justified. I need another way to be righteous in God's sight, and that's through faith in Christ. So, verse 16, therefore, it is of faith, that it might be according to grace, so that the promise might be sure to all the seed, not only to those who are of the law, but also to those who are of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. Justification is of faith, that it might be according to God's grace. Again, God justifies us freely by his grace. And it's important that it is justification through faith according to God's grace and not of the law, not of our works. Why is that important? Well, look what it says. So that the promise might be sure, so that we are sure to receive all that God has promised to us in his word. God justifies us freely by his grace, so that our justification is, listen, it's not contingent on our obedience. It's not contingent on our obedience. It's not contingent on us, but on God, so that we can be sure we will receive the promises, so that we can be certain that we will receive the promises. Justification by faith in God, apart from works, apart from law, apart from keeping religious rules, provides us with certainty. It provides us with surety, because it is now dependent upon the faithfulness of God and not our faithfulness. Isn't that good news? Because we know he never fails.